Hello and welcome to How to Be a Better DM. My name's Tanner Wayland, and today we're going to be talking a little bit about how to actually start a campaign in a fun way. But welcome to the show. As always, we're a show that talks about DMing for the DM out there who, doesn't just want to have a fun time, but a great time. Just to start this out, though, we kind of have a new format, a little bit shorter episodes, a little bit less produced. Justin talked about it earlier, but we've just had some life changes, and I wanted to address a little bit on my side before getting into. I will be talking about an actual topic, but basically, on my part, it comes down to the fact that I am planning here in the relatively near future. It could be postponed. I'm still it's in the works, but I am planning on starting a master's program, just as part of progressing my daytime job career. I feel like that's been stagnating a little bit, so it's just that next step. And luckily, I found a program that kind of does the evening thing, right? Where it's like, oh, you go in the evening to the university, and then you have however many hours of homework. But I don't know if the more observant among you have noticed, but Justin is much more on top of his crap than I am. He's always been that. He's great with executive functioning, great with time management, and I've always looked up to him for that. But that being as it is, I often struggle to find time. Sometimes for this podcast, for other things as well. I love the podcast though, so I do make it work. But I just realized when I was talking with him, when we were kind of having that discussion about like, hey, what's the future, especially with these changes recently, both of us just realized it was like, okay, how are we going to move forward if things are just going to get busier? And we just had to make a change. We're still very excited to keep the show going though. And personally, I mean, maybe I'm just being overly hopeful or something, but I always believe that, things, there's a time and season for different things, right? In life. And we had a good one just barely where we were really pushing and things, they slowed down a little bit, but they were picking up for a bit. And we really appreciate that. We love the community we've been able to build. And honestly, I personally believe that there will come a time when we can kind of jump back onto the horse metaphorically in a more serious way again and kind of have more to offer you guys. But for now, we just need to, we just want to provide the meat and potatoes of DMing so that you guys can still, have that, 10, 15 minutes a week where you're thinking, how can I improve my DMing? And it's going to be manageable for us, and that means that we can do it long term, and we're excited about that. But anyway, thank you for always supporting us. It means a lot. But to get to the actual episode topic, this topic, I talked about like, how can you start a campaign in a fun way? That may sound a little bit simple, but recently I came like face to face with that issue when I was starting a campaign for some family members, where I kind of had this general overarching idea of a campaign that was pretty fun, but I realized I was like, okay, this first couple sessions, I had a few ideas for how to start it. And what I did was I leaned into the character development, into character backstory, where each player had a moment at the start where they kind of got their chance to, be a part of the world, to have their own little spotlight for, 15, 20 minutes or whatever. But with, 5 people, that takes time. And some of them were more fun than others. Some of them were a little bit more serious. And it just made me realize, I was like, did I, as much as we talk about, being a DM is being a storyteller, and that's absolutely true. I realized I was like, I think I was leading a little bit too much with my storyteller foot, so to speak. Um, because especially some of my players were newer and they were younger, like young teens. And I could kind of tell that I was like, okay, this first session went a little bit long. And I don't know how many of them had like a fun time, quote unquote. I'm sure they enjoyed just the general vibes and stuff. But that's different from like just hopping right into something and just having a good time, right? So that's what I wanted to talk about. I was like, okay, how can I improve that? How can I kind of course correct a little bit and just make things fun? Uh, because in the past, I think a great example of starting something in a fun way is, just hopping right into a dungeon. Honestly, there is in Curse of Strahd. I don't know if any of you have played that one. Very popular, very common. It kind of has an optional intro dungeon, which is basically a haunted house with kind of like an underground area as well. But I had a lot of players who just like through that campaign, we weren't sadly able to finish it, but we got a good halfway through that whole campaign, and they like, I asked some of them, I was like, oh, what was your favorite part? And they were like, oh, that house, that haunted house at the start. It's because I just hopped right into exploration and some combats, and it didn't worry too much about the fluff, about the everything, right? There was like, I did add to that like a kind of funny dinner party at the start where like a local like aristocrat was like, being a silly aristocrat and also like asking them to explore like some disappearances that had happened in a certain place or something. I forget. It's been a while since I did that one. So there was like a little bit of a role play at the start there, but then they got into the action, and then they were in the haunted house, and they were fighting, a living armor and everything. They were fighting a broom and playing with the environment and jumping and all this stuff, right? And it taught me a few lessons that I kind of want to just distill here. Um, First, don't overcomplicate it. If you want to start a campaign or an adventure or a mini campaign or whatever, like if you want to start in a fun way that creates a great fun vibe, don't overthink it. Just think about like, hey, what is fun for D&D players in general? And in most cases, it's exploration and combat and a little bit of goofy role playing. If you find that you're like role playing, tone it down a bit. I think I learned that where I was like, hey, even think about your favorite podcast, like actual plays. Even they, I think, struggle with this where they try and do a lot of exposition up front. But you can tell as well, like listen to some of them where they start different campaigns and stuff. Some of them are trying so hard to start in an entertaining way, and they like lean into doing more of a combat or a mystery or something, right? And that's perfect. Others kind of are like, hey, we're building a whole thing. And I think they fall into a similar trap that I did where it's like, obviously, if you have a party that's really into the story, do that, right? But also every D&D player likes the exploration. They like just, going into some place they don't know about and looking at it and checking out what's happening. So, yeah, that's some of my advice is don't overthink it. Go with the meat and potatoes, namely exploration and combat with some light role playing. That's kind of the perfect mix there. Now, second, I think another part of like making sure that things are fun is actually asking the question, is this fun? It might seem a little bit simple, but you have to actually think about enjoyment and your players' enjoyment and what makes things fun. And I'm not just saying what I mentioned before about like, oh, exploration, things like that. You have to think about the little bits, like the component parts. Like what is fun about something? A goofy encounter with an NPC. That's fun. Something where people are where the players are prone to mess up, and when it does, there are funny, disastrous consequences. Combats that kind of make them think a little bit, right? Where they kind of have to play around or, try different things. Those things are all like legitimately fun because they work with certain parts of the brain and make you think like, oh gosh, this is so new, this is different. And another part of what's fun is being different from what players would have expected in the past. Like starting in a tavern, I think that's fun for some people. I think it's been done so much. Honestly, not a great way to lean into the fun. And I mean that in a non derogatory way. I mean that in a, hey, maybe they're in a tavern and suddenly half of it's blown away. And they're like, what the heck happened? And they see that there's a big old trench leading into a dungeon right there. And it looks like a worm was just like ate part of their tavern that they were in, right? Like just something that gets them into it and feels very unique. Now, another thing that I think is worth considering if you're trying to lean into the fun at the start is just asking what your players want to do, right? Ask them when you're prepping. Further, actually, think about what they have liked in the past and plan around that. I think if you're able to do that and actually, if you know your players well, then you can be like, oh, I know exactly what's gonna be super fun. Don't just think general. Don't just think like, oh, what's a good way to start a campaign? Think, what's a great, fun way to start a campaign for these specific players? If you think that way, then you're gonna have some interesting ideas. And I think what you'll realize very soon is like, oh, if you're able to start out a campaign on some fun notes, then you'll be able to work in the role playing and the character development and everything later. That comes, so don't worry about it. Just make sure that you prioritize the fun, so that you don't kind of start a campaign overly serious and miss out on creating a great vibe at the start. I hope that you do that. I hope that you enjoy the kind of new vibe that it creates for your campaign, and you know what, you can do that even going forward with an existing campaign. But regardless, wish you the best, and until next time, let's roll initiative.